Have you ever met a person who radiated evil? What were they like? U/Lucall responded. Extreme narcissist. The guy sent emails to me and my boss about my poor work performance while I was sitting at my dying mother's hospital bed. When I returned from that trip a week later, he was literally standing in my office with a tape measure. Apparently he took my absence as an opportunity to take my office, permanently. I have a higher job title than this guy to top it off. And no, he didn't get the office. U/Hey Sandiat Speet responded. I went to pick up a takeout order at a restaurant bar near me. I walk inside and there is a guy standing by the door also waiting for his takeout order. He never said a word, just stared at me the entire time he was waiting. My gut told me I was unsafe. The cashier gave him his food and he stood there for a minute or two, like he was thinking of a reason to stall. He asked the cashier for another order of wings. I texted my husband and asked if he could pick me up because this guy was giving me the creeps. As soon as my husband arrived, creepy guy said, "Actually, I think I'm fine with a dozen. You guys enjoy those wings," and he left. I get the chills thinking about how I could have potentially been mugged or worse if I didn't listen to my gut that night. U/#Baum responded. There was this guy who grew up in the neighboring street as me, and he was just a really, really bad person. It probably doesn't sound like much now, but when he was about 11 he'd do things like borrow video games, never give them back and then just swear blind he never borrowed them in the first place. This sounds minor, but it kind of went from there really. As he got older he'd start to steal money, beat the shit out of people for no reason, etc. His ex-girlfriend took out a restraining order on him after they broke up because she was frightened of him. The best example I can give of what he was like was when he heard that someone had said something about him that he'd taken offense to. The person who'd done this was in the pub one afternoon with his wife and kids, and this guy walks into the pub, doesn't say a word and just headbutts him in front of his family. But at the same time, he could be quite well-spoken and charming when he wanted something from somebody, and it's only recently occurred to me that he's obviously a sociopath. He's now living in a tent and addicted to heroin, and I think it was always going to go that way. U/the_last_Ronin responded. Years back I was working on a mural project with a non-profit. Part of the gig was 1 day a week to teach the 7 to 12-year-olds art. There was a 8 to 10-year-old brother and sister in one group. The brother bullied the sister mercilessly, no other kid would get near him, they all knew he was trouble. We separated the two, but once your back was turned he was right back hitting her and even biting her. The last straw was when he took a newly sharpened pencil and straight up stabbed her in the hand. There was screaming, crying, blood everywhere. They called the parents but I insisted on her being taken to the hospital as the pencil was halfway through her hand. The brother had no remorse and even a smirk on his face. His eyes were very dark and dead, looking like in shows where they show a pic of a killer and people describe them being dead-eyed. The ambulance comes as the parents get there. This is clearly not the first time something like this has happened. Because they didn't complete the activity, the non-profit wanted the two back in the next week. I flat out refused, which caused a big deal. I put my foot down and wouldn't relent. I told them that kid needs help and so does the sister. Later on the coordinator told me that the year before they had to take away his drawings because he would draw pictures of kids bleeding and drew dead animals. Like, how many warning signs do you need? That kid needs help. U/Leo Beer responded. Fuck yes. My old boss. Superficially charming, obsessed by money, evil to the core. Just one tale amongst many. A colleague who had recently become a father was tragically killed in a motorcycle accident. Being a small, close-knit community in a foreign country, we rallied round and did as much as we could for the grieving widow. Our boss contacted her and told her that she would look after the child, who would never want for anything, then tried to buy her. Our boss, rich, childless and in her 50s, turned up at the house with a bag of money and tried to take the poor, fatherless child from its mother and, then, on being rebuffed, refused to help with any costs at all. I have so many others. U/the wrong baked potato responded. There was a soldier in my unit who was a continual fuck-up. Always in trouble. He had gotten a few Article 15s and things were moving towards general court-martial. He was restricted to post. So he decided that was the perfect time to hop in a car after drinking a bit too much, go roaring down a tiny rural road at about 70, and hit another car head-on. He lived. They didn't. And he had absolutely no remorse. No remorse when he was recovering in the hospital, no remorse while in pre-trial confinement, no remorse when the verdict was read, no remorse when they put the cuffs on him and put him in the van that would take him to Leavenworth. In fact, he was spouting off about how the army screwed him over. Fuck that scumbag. U/low_key_crazies responded. He was extremely nice and polite. but wore to interested in talking to my daughter. Ended up telling her to scream if he ever tried to speak to her and to never go around him, and telling him that he had no business coming anywhere near her. He was my aunt's husband and they were staying at my grandma's house while waiting for their house to be ready. Once they moved out, my cousin, his adult stepdaughter, admitted that he used to talk to her about her vagina on a daily basis and tell her that it smelled good. He absolutely radiated evil, no matter what he acted like. He also kept asking about our dogs. What would they do if someone broke in? They will attack, just like they're trained to do. What if someone had a weapon? Well, so do I. And my 4 guard dogs can smell you before you ever get in the door. We changed to better, stronger locks. You/Faf alone responded. When I was in jail, I was a trustee that cleaned the psych lockdown pod. There was one woman in there that was just off. It's something you see only very rarely, when a person just screams. Wrong, stay away just by their face, especially with small women who aren't conventionally thought of as such a threat. She just sat around staring off into space all the time. Didn't respond to me saying hello at all. Had random psychotic outbursts, bit a guard one time. I only got more curious just what she was in for after, just to take her down the hall for video court. They put her in full shackles with a black box, and had a team of 5 escorting her, 1 ahead, 2 on the sides holding her arms, and 2 following behind, tasers laser sighted on her back. Apparently it was more than just the random violent outbursts, they just didn't like her. One of the guards eventually filled me in on her charges. Right from birth until 18 mo later when arrested, she had been violently sexually abusing her infant daughter. Truly horrific stuff. They had videos she made, so there wasn't any room for doubt. Women usually get lenient sentences for sex crimes, but this was so bad she's now serving life without parole. You can find more details of the case online. It's worse than what even that lets on, from the details I heard from guards that had to take her to court for trial and be in the room. You/Snoogoats 9114 responded. I work in a K-12 school. Met a kindergartner whose eyes were just soulless. He wasn't rambunctious like the other kinders, calm and steady, but bad things always happened around him. Grade 3, he faked a murder scene in the forest behind the school and would take kids back there to freak them out. In grade 10 there were stories of him planning a school shooting. He was expelled and charged. But I believe now the charges are dropped. I have never once felt comfortable with him in the room. He's still a minor now. I'm worried about what he will be like as an adult. In all my years, LVE never met a kid like him. We tried several social interventions on the school level. He was good at always giving the correct answer without any emotional response. You/Deleted responded. I grew up under the thumb of an abusive mother. TW, this is violent. I remember very starkly the first time she choked me. I don't remember what set her off, but she grabbed me by the back of my neck and threw me across the room, and I landed on my back. Had a coughing fit because of how hard I hit the floor, and while coughing I felt hands wrap around my throat. Opened my eyes to see her crouching over me, choking me. Her face was all twisted, but her eyes were different. Her eyes were all squished up in anger, but her actual eyeballs just seemed blank. She was so angry and so devoid of emotion at the same time. She just watched me sputter. I wound up passing out from her choking me. She left me there to wake up alone. I had bruises for a few weeks, a bruise all over my back, and my voice was gone for at least a week and a half. She never addressed it. I was maybe 8. I am safe now. Yesterday was a year since I cut contact. But I'll never forget that experience. You/Deleted responded. I was just a kid and my parents were visiting my dad's mum and half-brother. During our visit, my parents, siblings, and I took a trip to visit a man-made lake that my dad was curious about just out of town. While driving around it, Dad noticed his ex-stepdad's truck and he pulled over to see if he was around. Out popped my ex-grandfather, and smiles as he embraces my dad. I had never met the guy, but had heard a lot about him and knew that him and my grandmother had been divorced for a number of years. While ever curious about this man that was in half of my dad's years, I hopped out the car to say hello. Just half a meter away I felt pressure around my body and instantly felt the need to be alert. Frightened by the sensation, I grabbed onto my dad and timidly said hello before my dad quickly ended the conversation and took me to the car. A few years later, after reminiscing on memories, Dad told me he remembered that experience and told me that he noticed I felt the man's evil aura and he felt the need to protect me. A little while later, as an adult listening to my dad and his siblings talk, I learnt that he had been in prison for sexual assault and that he also sexually assaulted his children. For all I know, there's probably more disgusting things he's done that I have not been told, but his children that still hold his family name are in the process of taking on the surnames of my grandmother and her relatives, so they don't have anything that associated with him. Honestly really glad that I learnt all this in a timely way and that my dad had enough sense to notice I was uncomfortable. U/placeholder null responded. This kid at my music camp when I was in middle school. He didn't really talk to anyone, and always played his cello very aggressively. Rumor had it that he kicked a girl in the mouth for taking his pencil. That kind of kid. Fast forward a few days, and I'm hanging out with my 2 friends at the waterfront, and we see him throwing rocks at something. We ask what he's doing, and he tells us that he's trying to knock a turtle off of a log. A few tries later, he clocks it in the head, and it falls off. That same day, he went up to a bunch of girls who found a tiny toad in the sand, and asked to hold it. He apparently tried to crush it, but they took it back. The next day, he's at the waterfront again, poking something with a stick. My friends and I investigate, and he's poking a snake. I knew that it was poisonous, so I told him to stop, but he whacks me in the arm. A counselor ran over to break it up, but understandably forgot about the whole thing when he saw the snake, and just got us safely away from the snake. U/masked_sombrero responded. My senior year in high school I was taking an art class. Most of the other students were juniors or seniors. In the middle of the school year we had this freshman kid join the class. He would sit at the same table as me and my friends in the class. Our art teacher was cool, and we had a door that went outside to the side of the school that she would let us go out and smoke cigarettes. One day, sitting at the table, this kid says one time I ate 4 cigarettes. Like what? We just thought he was a weirdo. I was going to the restroom one day from the art class and I go out in the hallway and he's opening the janitor's closet, looks around, and goes into the janitor's closet. Being all sneaky like IDK how he didn't see me, or maybe he just didn't care if I seen him go into the janitor's closet. I have no idea what he was doing, I just thought he was being weird. Couple months later he's gone. Front page of the newspaper is an article about him being sentenced for raping a 3-year-old girl. Come to find out, the school was very aware of this, and had put him in our art class so the teacher could keep an eye on him. The worst part, in the paper they quoted him as saying she was asking for it, regarding the rape. How the hell is a 3-year-old gonna be asking to have sex? Like this kid thought he could get away with it or something. This dude was whack. U/M_is_it_you responded. Yes. A former patient of mine. I'm not squeamish, like, at all, but that guy creeped me out. There was always a feeling of unease, of lurking danger. He didn't stare or anything conventionally creepy, he was so ill he couldn't move without assistance. Just that feeling, and it was worst when he finally died. I've seen my fair share of corpses and usually there is a feeling of peace and okayness. Back then I worked with the very old folks. Not with this guy, oh no. It was pure discomfort, hitting you in the face. A kind of appalling wrongness and overwhelming feeling that this guy was not going to a nice place. I almost believe that was hell looking at him, and I'm an atheist. What I found out a week later was almost relieving. He presumably killed his own baby boy, because he was in the way. The older boy wasn't so much of a burden, but he gave him into a children's home for 2 years. All because he wanted to build a house in peace. His wife was in another ward at the same time, suffering dementia, and she walked around all day with a little puppet you weren't allowed to touch, crying most of the time. His living son was as much at her side as he could be. He told us all of this. He said his mother had that puppet for years, always searching for his little brother. He also told us he's just so glad that his father was dead. He never said father or dad, he said the full name. His and his mother's life were pure torture, but he couldn't leave her alone with his father. He didn't even want to see him or anything. U/Road Ounce Freelancer responded. I've written about it before, but attending the trial of Lux, owner of Hurt to the Core, the most heinous dark web website that ever existed. Until a few months ago, I only knew of Lux through Anil's interview and whispers and rumors on dark web forums, where the general consensus was revulsion. But mostly, he was so hardcore so evil, that we tried not to talk about him at all. So coming face to face with this simple kid who looked around the courtroom with a kind of bemused interest in the proceedings was jarring. Shouldn't he be grotesque and deformed or something? Shouldn't there be some sort of outward appearance that betrayed he was the kind of childman who facilitated some of the most heinous crimes even hardened, experienced detectives had ever encountered? Well, he didn't look like a monster. There was nothing particularly off about him. He could walk among us and we would never suspect. In fact, he seems to be one of those instantly forgettable people. U/Deleted responded. I've posted this before but L copypasta. There was a kid I met in high school that I remember instantly hating just by looking at him. I'm not a violent person, never been in a fight in my life, but as soon as I saw this kid I wanted to bash his face in, and that feeling persisted all throughout school. He was kind of a bully ringleader but never really put himself in a position to get in trouble. Also was a rich kid, so was pretty instantly popular. Years after high school I read in the paper that he got arrested with large quantities of drugs and unregistered guns in his car after attempting to shoot his parents. I remember the kid always had this really punchable smirk on his face, think like Joffrey from Game of Thrones but IRL and not acting. Always laughing at the misfortune of others, often causing it by goading his friends into bullying people. I was 6 feet 2 inches 240 pounds in high school, so they never really messed with me, but the group was big enough that they probably could have kicked my ass if they had wanted to. I just kept my distance. U/deleted responded. My neighbor. Something was off. She was a skinny, frail mid-30s woman, with a son. The son was about 8 to 9, he was off as well, something just not right, and eerie. They were always trying to make small talk at the fence, when getting into my car, or in the front yard. One day, the kid says, "Help come, I think someone is trying to break in," to which I replied, "Did you call 911? He said no. Then I replied, "Where is your mom?" He said, "Inside." Then the kid badgered me to come inside and check. I pretty much said, "No way, your mom is in there." In my head, "You guys are crazy, and if she don't care to move then must be just fine." Anyways, they move out. Few months later she's in the news. She had a chopped up body in her freezer. When they moved it thawed a bit before cooling again at new residence, and the scent drew some attention and was discovered. I can see the evil in her smile 5 years later. U/Carrington again responded. My stepfather was evil personified. He was an alcoholic who drank massive amounts of alcohol without passing out, and he hid his drinking from my mother before they married. He had been married 3 times before but only told us about one. My sister, who was 14 years old, nearly 15 years old, was immediately the scapegoat and treated badly. He would watch her get into and out of the bathtub. When he put his hand down her panties and tried to rape her, she begged our mother for help. She slapped my sister for trying to steal her man. My sister was able to get an older brother to take her in, 150 miles away. That left me alone at home at almost 11. He had been trained by the Marines as an interrogator translate to torturer. He decided to use me to maintain his skills, and to toughen me up. My mother knew, actually watched, and laughed. I have required multiple surgeries and lots of therapy. Eventually, my mother kicked him out. He stuffed rags into the chimney to try to kill us with carbon monoxide. He took a job at my school so that I would have to see him regularly. I think this qualifies as pure. U/deleted responded. 2 brothers that lived down the street from me when we were kids were notorious for being delinquents. Killed a swan and left its body floating in a nearby lake. Pretty sure they killed some of the stray cats in the area, started a mild forest fire. Mom was a gang member, they were constantly involved in fights, they were extremely and openly racist, etc. As teens, one of them raped one of my sister's friends. They moved away a year or 2 after that, haven't seen them since. I occasionally look their names up and both have been in and out of jail as adults. The older one is a neo-Nazi with racist tattoos all over his face and neck. Also seems to really like beating his, also, neo-Nazi, wife. Edit. Older brother has apparently been back in jail for over a year now. Possession of stolen firearms and fleeing from police in a stolen vehicle. That was less than 6 months after a stabbing. Shout out to the American justice system for inexplicably letting him walk for that. U/Deizadoodle responded. I grew up with one. My 4 years older brother was sadistic and very creative in creating new ways to humiliate and degrade me when I was a child. He would spit and urinate in my mouth. He constantly hit me with his knuckles, leaving knots and bruises on my arms and legs. He mentally, emotionally, physically, and sexually abused me. He passed me around for his friends to sexually abuse. He was very large for his age and I was tiny. He nearly killed me twice, once while we were swimming by dumping me in water over my head and leaving me. My other brother found me and saved me, and once by burying me alive with plywood, planks, and dirt on top when I was 5 or 6 years old. Every time I tried to push the planks off, dirt would cave in on my face. Thankfully my sister-in-law came to visit and heard me screaming. She was furious, but my brother claimed we were playing and he forgot me. He never got in trouble for any of the evil things he did. My mother refused to believe me when I tried to get her to protect me. He also killed several pets. U/Frosty_mess_2265 responded. Walking my dog. He's about 8 months old at this time, and we've had him for 4. Super friendly, total love bug, not an aggressive bone in his body. He's also still a puppy, so super bouncy and playful. Anyway, we're walking along our usual route and my dog stops and digs his heels in. I look up and about 50 feet away there's a guy standing on the pavement having a cigarette. He's wearing a beanie, and my dog is a little nervous about people wearing hats, don't ask me why, so I'll assume that's the problem. I crouch down and start trying to coax him forward, thinking it might be a good learning experience for him. He won't budge. Then he starts growling. Proper, angry, I am going to bite you growling. Snout crinkled, ears back, lips drawn up, showing all his teeth, his tongue even flicks out a little bit. He's making this awful guttural snarling sound and goes into a sort of half-crouch, standing himself perpendicular to me and pressing his body against my shins. I look up and the guy with the beanie is smiling. Just smiling benignly as my dog snarls like he wants to rip his face off. I decide to bounce, but my dog won't turn his back on this guy. Instead he walks me in a perfect half-circle around him, always keeping himself between me and the guy, always growling, never taking his eyes off him. I'm shitting myself. The guy is just smiling. At last when we're past him he says, "Something wrong with your dog?" "He doesn't like you," I say. "I'm number 47 responded. My dad. I know everyone likes to throw around the word narcissistic, but my dad truly is one to the letter. He literally only cares about himself, is only nice to people that can do something for him, benefit him in some way, can't be told anything, and God forbid you even have a slight difference of opinion than him, because he will lose his shit on you in a half a second, and will take it as a huge personal attack on him if you dare not agree with everything he says. Throws tantrums like a giant fucking 3-year-old, lies about literally everything and then gets pissed when he gets caught in his lies. He's also horribly racist, he's downright mean and nasty, and negative about everything. Threatens to leave and take his money, his union retirement and SS disability that he wouldn't have if it wasn't for my mom helping him fill out all the damn paperwork and making him realize that it would be a good idea to stay in the union for just like 3 more years, or else no retirement because he wouldn't qualify, because he didn't want to do that, at every perceived slight, knowing that just because if those 2 payments he makes more than my mom and it wouldn't be fair of him to just ditch her. Cause she wouldn't be able to afford the house payment and stuff and she'd have to move into a dumpy apartment probably in a bad area cause shit's expensive where we are. But he acts like he's a goddamn saint and it's everyone around him that's the problem. I hate him. You/Oftipaunt responded. Experienced this on a subway train in NYC years ago. Train stopped at an outdoor station and a small group of young men jumped on, like they had just done something really bad and were running away from it. Doors closed and they started barking orders at each other about splitting up at the next stop. Some poor passenger must have caught their eye, because one of them starting yelling at him like, "Motherfucker, what the F you looking at?" in a loud, frightening voice. Everyone just sat in silence, looking down. They got off at the next stop. When the doors closed, there was an audible sound of relief. Everyone was saying how scared they were to even move a muscle. We all felt the evilness of that encounter. Girl next to me pulled out her cell phone, called 911 and told them if they were looking for the guys who just committed a crime on 170th Street in the Bronx, they just got off the number 4 train at Tremorne Avenue. Everyone laughed. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Leave your own stories down below, I would love to read them. If you would like to see more videos like this, please like and subscribe, it helps me out greatly.